state of bother that caused a lot of deaths not more than 10 years ago, that had the world reeling from its effects, was Ebola. There are very many caregivers that passed away. This disease found its way across the borders of many nations, and unfortunately, it's back. In Uganda and the DRC, about 139 people are said to have died from Ebola already, and this is in a short time. Yesterday, we saw the troubling pictures of people trying to claim a body that is said to have been deceased of Ebola. And so the questions in terms of border surveillance, in terms of travel surveillance, there are many questions that we ask. And so our Healthy Friday conversation today is trying to understand exactly what we're doing at the moment and what is happening with Ebola. And it seems to have grabbed the attention that was being placed on hantavirus. And so now we're saying, excuse me, this one, let's look at it a little bit closer. To enable us have this conversation this morning, is the medical director with MSF, Dr. Kalyan Vilvela, and he joins us this morning. Good morning, Dr.
Good morning. Nice to be here.
Thank you for being here this morning. Karibu Sana. And of course, with this Friday, it seems that this is the Friday where we do things very differently today. So we're going to jump right into it. First of all, for our reminder, what is Ebola? We know these things: fever, joint pain, hemorrhage, etc. Almost 90%. I don't like to use the word guarantee. Maybe there's another word you'll tell us. But of death once the symptoms have progressed. What are we looking at here?
Ebola was first identified in 1976. The name of Ebola probably would have seen comes from the river from Zaire. You know, that time formerly the Zaire and currently the DRC.
Okay.
Right? Ebola is Ebola viral disease. It is caused, a bit of medical term here, it is caused by the genus called Ortho-Ebola virus.
Mm-hmm.
And it has different families, strains and species, etc. The major concerning ones are the Ebola virus, formerly called the Zaire virus, the Sudan virus, and a Bundibujo virus. Bundibujo virus, the current strain.
So the current one is the Bundibujo virus. Okay.
Yes. Which is not a very common species. Not to get confused with the strains and the species. It's a different species.
Okay.
Previously, it's not common because the outbreaks that were seen earlier, like the 2014 and 16 in West Africa and the previous ones in DRC and Uganda, were not from the Bundibujo virus.
Okay. So, it seems to come and go. Are we saying that there's just some Ebola in the atmosphere just kind of hanging around and it's waiting to be activated? Because Uganda and DRC have had a hard time with saying, okay, surveillance, and we said, find maybe one case, and then for months on end, we hear nothing. And then, we hear it again. What is the phenomenon behind this? Where is it?
The Ebola viruses, the filoviruses, are very interesting. A lot is unknown. What is known so far is within the rich animal reservoirs in the forest, there is, it harbors natively in a specific type of bats.
Okay.
We don't know, due to environmental conditions, there is an exposure from that animal reservoir to the humans.
Okay.
Different reasons: climate, environmental. When humans go, to the forest, insecurity could be one of the reasons. When you're hiding in the forest, you come in contact with these infectious bats. Primates are also there. And then one of the reason is if by chance having a contact with the body fluids of these dead animals, or when someone consumes bush meat, then you have the transmission. Right. There's a lot unknown, and we cannot fully eradicate and say that can we swipe out all the bats? No, I think it is really difficult. So there's a lot of studies going on to better understand what is happening between the outbreaks, exactly to your question. What are those triggers that are causing, or where are the virus harboring, and how is it changing? There's a lot to be known. But what is known is, as I said, there's an animal reservoir, conditions that are conducive. Then there is an interaction with the humans, and then
it's transmission.
The transmission comes and the outbreak happens.
Now, so we have sounds like we have a fair understanding of the genealogy, the history, the development of the disease. And therefore my concern goes to the communities, because once there is a transmission, once somebody is infected, then the spread, as we have known, becomes very rapid with very disastrous outcome. I mean, MSF, I know they've been at the forefront of being like the rapid response teams, and they've done a great job. But I look at the measures that perhaps the communities need to be empowered with for them to, one, detect, if not avoid, then detect before it escalates to now a pandemic, an epidemic. From where we stand, are the communities, because there seems to be known hotspots, in a manner of speaking, where the infections happen mostly. Are the communities, in terms of world response, because COVID, the coronavirus, shut down the entire globe. So, and this virus is the mode of transmission is very fast. So if not well managed, they could not just interfere with the normal socio-economic activities, but it's a health hazard that can easily wipe out a community dead. Do we have enough awareness at the community level to try and prevent, detect, avoid transmission or infection?
Very good question. Before I go to the details of it, I just want to highlight we should not panic. Ebola is not like COVID-19.
Okay.
It is not an airborne disease. And it's very rare that it has caused pandemic. No. Ebola is very infectious. The fatality rate is very high, the death rate, but it is not that super contagious like the COVID-19 also. So that we have to be very clear. It's not an air-to-airborne. It comes with contact with the bodily fluids or contact with an infected person. That's one. And you raised a very important point. In MSF's experience, working with the authorities, the Congolese authorities and elsewhere in the world, community engagement, community participation, and community trust are paramount important. And working with them, involving them in what we do, making them understand what it is really important. And one aspect I want to highlight is, as the previous question was on, why is it coming? We cannot stop it. But surveillance, early detection, and early alert are the key aspects that have to be in place in wherever we have seen Ebola or Ebola viral diseases. That's a very key aspect.
Dr. So WHO, through the Director General, Tedros Dr. has said that this is a regional emergency, not yet a global pandemic. But you look at a strain that is not common as compared to what we have experienced before. So then one would ask the question, are we approaching this the right way in terms of addressing its surveillance and also in terms of treatment? Are we able to deal with this new strain effectively?
Very good one. Yes, WHO's, according to their criteria, feels it's a public health emergency of international concern. As well as African CDC has put out their as a continental concern. We have to also understand the outbreak is happening in a context in northeastern Uganda that is very volatile. access is very hard, reaching there. It's an insecure context. There is an active conflict going on for a long while. In the recent months, the conflict has escalated. There's more than 1 million displaced people in Ituri and plus 1 million displaced in North Kivu. Infrastructure is minimal. Economic situation, we all know the situations we are in. So it's adding another layer of burden on the existing health structures. Imagining when there is a displaced population, the people working, healthcare workers are also moving.
Yes.
There is insecurity. So there are many challenges there. I think just not one. In addition to that, the virus, the species is something different from what was dealt with in the past. There were 2 previous outbreaks of the similar species. One was in Uganda. It was actually from Bundibujo district in the western Uganda that this virus came out, right, in 2007-8. And the last outbreak was in 2012 in DRC. And the authorities have worked on it, So it's not very straightforward. As you said, surveillance is important. So far, the numbers have been coming out on suspected cases, deaths, confirmed deaths versus confirmed cases. And we feel, and as well as reading from different reports, probably this is a lot under-reporting as well. One of the aspects is surveillance is challenging. It's also to question when the initial cases started quite weeks earlier. We could not alert ourselves. We could not have those alerts coming sooner. So it's very important to have that early detection and alarm and alert coming in, so we are able to prepare.
You speak of underreporting because there is a possibility that the first incidences happened weeks earlier. So I want to look at it and not also be so pessimistic, but is there a possibility that what is in the communities is far much greater than what has been reported, and that should be cause for concern?
Possible.
Okay.
We have to, that's what the challenging part is, the context, as I said, the conflict, insecurity, the terrain, the logistics aspect, and etc. And also because it's a different strain, we don't have at this point those appropriate testing kits. The testing kits that are available are in the capital are for Ebola virus, that's a Zaire virus that was previously causing outbreaks.
Oh, okay.
But the test kits for this specific species have to be adapted. And we use something called Gene Expert cartridges. This is like a printer, a small, and then you insert the cartridge and you have all the elements in it and it diagnoses. But for Bundibujo, it's not yet there. And the supply is also not sufficient. So when you are saying so many suspected cases, sometimes it's possible this could be malaria. This is also a malaria endemic area. If you have fever, body pains, headaches, these are the initial symptoms of Ebola. So it can be in other diseases as well.
Okay, and then that was a question I wanted to ask, because as we looked through the symptoms earlier in the morning, and I said, okay, well, it's very possible that this could actually be malaria. So in terms of surveillance, and then because, you hear Ebola, you panic, and that's just a human reaction to what we've seen that this disease can actually do in terms of destruction. So then we would imagine that the testing and the surveillance then is able to distinguish between the two. At what point are we getting to when somebody's feeling symptoms that could be malaria and maybe don't feel as though they need to go into having it checked, and when we're saying this could be a little bit more serious? So when is surveillance intercepting that thought and saying, actually, no, if you feel this of this degree, then you must come in and get checked? And that time when you're feeling the symptoms, is that when we say that it is of a contagious nature?
Good one. You know, those are some of the challenges. Imagining even in urban settings or in countries where the healthcare is at a level, the some of these symptoms mask. You know, a malaria could be, or a typhoid or a dengue could be resembling
Yeah.
Ebola, right? And in those remote locations, it's harder. But we know that the viral hemorrhagic fever, Ebola virus,
Yeah.
is endemic. There are outbreaks happening. That's the key thing we need to concern, right? We
Okay.
need to consider.
Okay.
Why it's not happening elsewhere, right? It's happening in those specific spots, right? And my advice would be, do not wait. If you have those fever or headaches and symptoms, then visit the nearest health facility. So at least that is very important. Sometimes we think, as you asked, what would be that thing that distinguishes clearly?
Yes.
Is we call it viral hemorrhagic fever or bleeding, you know, it's a bleeding from the nose, bleeding from the vomiting. It's not that common.
Okay.
In quite a number of cases, that's the last signs and symptoms you will have.
Okay.
So these are some of the challenges, but for in the current situation, you know, our advice is, if you feel sick, if you have fever, and if you think if you are in contact with a sick person, because there is already an Ebola declared, please visit the nearest health facility, consult a healthcare worker who will be able to do the necessary. You know.
Well, and I look at that, Dr. Ari, and I'm like, yes, I hear the advisory. And then it so happens that somebody in the neighborhood, in the community where there's been reported cases, is feeling unwell. They go to the facility, but then the facility is under-equipped. They don't have the necessary apparatus to run exhaustive and comprehensive tests. So then one is at the mercy of the best that the facility can offer. And then I also looked at that vis-a-vis the overlapping symptoms. You have clusters of symptoms that can be shared by conditions. And we have seen also stigma, because if you know there is Ebola, and now here you start coughing, you seem to have a fever, we will respond in a certain way. That could either interfere with treatment or delay treatment or cause more harm. You have been around various countries in Africa. When you look at our health systems, are we growing to be responsive, ready? Because most of the time we are reactive, you know. We saw the other day there's a withdrawal of the US aid, and the entire continent was in panic. They're saying that there are some conditions we will not be able to continue treating. When you look at our health systems, Kenya might be a bit far from the border of Congo and Uganda, but you know, human movement nowadays, within 24 hours, somebody can crisscross this continent. 6 hours in one country, another 8 hours in a different country, and then you sleep in a fourth country. Therefore, transmission can be very high. And you remember there is a time there used to be this airport screening, and quarantine was very popular. So our health systems ready, according from where you stand, the point of advisory and policy influence, to develop shockers that can safeguard the public health of not just the country but the continent, because at the end of the day we are one.
No, very good one. You know, as I said, on the health level of healthcare and all, I think it varies. You know, I wouldn't go much into detail.
Yeah.
Every country, every Ministry of Health trying their best to provide that access and quality care. Of course, there are definitely, we have to improve. We're not yet there, but I think those, process are going on. One of, if I got you well, because you had quite a number of them, I think one of the, just want to connect is, if we see the current outbreak, as I said already, the multiplicity of issues there is also Ituri province also borders Sudan and South Sudan. And it is also a province that has a lot of mining and trade going on. And it has also insecurity.
Yes.
So there is, and these high number of internally displaced populations with the conflict. So this makes it even further challenging. And for us, we say, yes, those measures are there, screening at point of entry that was done, just your temperature, if you have symptoms, to separate the person. Isolation is one of the best preventive measure. The other thing is, if you are coming from an Ebola confirmed, outbreak, if you have symptoms, just inform the authorities, and better to avoid travel.
Yeah.
And what we feel is what stops learning from the previous outbreaks. What stops Ebola is controlling at its source.
Yes.
We need to track the transmission chain. That's what we, MSF, WHO, and with the authorities we used to see. From that initial case to who are the contacts, and all that chain is identified. Then you are able to isolate the patients, diagnose who are confirmed cases, quarantine for 21 days suspects, and you're breaking that chain. It's very important. So surveillance, epidemiological trends, and tests to confirm are really important.
Yeah. You see, Dr. Hari, many would say, rather, it has been seen as if Ebola is an African disease. Rather, it comes from the continent, right? And you've mentioned it's based off where it lives better, the forest and all that, right? And one then would ask the question, as a continent, knowing that this is a problem that primarily comes from us, are we seeing movements towards vaccination? First of all, does Ebola have vaccination? And why are we not seeing that being pushed like the BCG vaccine, where one would say the entire continent is vaccinating? Is that the way to go for us to say that we have a huge number of population, especially in areas that commonly get affected? Is that a way then in the future to say we are putting in measures of dealing with Ebola once and for all?
A very good one. I think that's the way it is. As you said, prevention, early detection, and a treatment that are specific to Ebola and viral hemorrhagic fevers, and vaccination is a key. What do we have is we have a couple of vaccines now.
Okay.
Erbevo is one of a type that was used earlier, but these vaccines are currently used for the Ebola virus, the Zaire virus that was previously coming. We are not yet sure if the existing viruses, how effectively are for the current strain, the current species. That's the thing. There are a lot of discussions. There are vaccine candidates within the pipeline. And the previous vaccines have been used as emergency clinical trial conditions. And MSF has been part of it. The last ones, even the monoclonal antibodies we call that for the treatment, were used in some of the treatment facilities. Later, we came to know their effectiveness, and later they were in the market for use. So for the specific outbreak, there are not known ones that are effective. The previous ones were tested for this species in the primates and seem to be effective to stop the transmission. The spread for 75% or so, but we don't know. So there are a lot of discussions happening at the WHO level, a lot of actors, the manufacturers, on fast-tracking emergency use in outbreak settings. So you would have heard some discussions were there. If we start now, it might take 3 to 6 months or 9 months, but I think everyone is trying to fast-track the available promising candidates to pushing on. Your final question is, we need to push for it. I think specifically governments and ministries also from the continent, we need to push for it to have appropriate treatment and care. It's not easy. The attempts have been made, but that should continue.
And I want to look at the role of culture in vis-a-vis transmission. because it is, in the African context, it is only courteous to shake hands, just hug, meaning human contact. And you remember one of the things we did, much as you say that the contrast is not as much with COVID, was one of the measures we were highly recommended to employ was social distancing. When it comes to Ebola, what are some of the do-it-yourself, for though there may not be confirmed cases, but you never know. What are some of the things we may want to start doing?